Hey guys, welcome back to Loudmouth Fisticuffs. Once again, episode...
Don't say it. Don't say it.
Jeff? Dose. Thank you very much. Dose, episode 12 for all of you. That is your English-Spanish lesson. I messed up myself. Lesson for the day. Don't laugh at me, Jeff. Don't laugh at me.
I died inside every time you say that.
Guys, I tell you what, we are so pumped. It's just been awesome time since we started the show. 12 episodes in. We appreciate the love and the feedback so much. Now we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify Podcasts, and of course on YouTube as always. So there's more places than ever to check us out and to give us a listen. So please go to those different venues, different platforms, subscribe to us, follow us, listen to it, give us a thumbs up, give us a good 5-star rating.
You can do it.
You can do it. And we just appreciate it so much. I cannot thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. But so, as always, Mr. Live Worldwide, Jeff Houston.
Oh, collar up.
Our special
hold on. What the hell, man? What you always get to intro the guests. May I remind you, out of the two of us, who makes a living at introductions? And somehow you always get the introductions. Well, I think the people are ready for Mr. Live Worldwide to start earning his keep on Loudmouth Fisticuffs. And I think I will do the honors this time. Josh, are you okay with that? Is that savvy? Will that work for you?
By all means, Jeff Houston.
Well, I don't care if you like it or not. I'm going to do it anyway. So, for those of you listening here at Loudmouth Central, we've been incorporating guests in, and this guest is a very, very good friend of mine. And let me tell you something. If you have ever seen anybody pick up a headset, it is this man that you know. It doesn't matter if it's soccer, doesn't matter if it's mixed martial arts, doesn't matter if it's boxing, lathe, bare knuckle. He's all over the board, and of course, most notably, you know him as being the longtime voice of Bellator, and of course, he is the voice of Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship. My very good friend joining us, Mr. Sean Wheelock. Sean, what the hell is up?
Jeff, Josh, thanks so much for having me on the program, guys. It's my pleasure.
That was absolutely beautiful, Jeff.
I get paid to do these things. You should know that by now.
Guys, I tell you what, Sean, it's an absolute pleasure on our end, sir. We
awesome. Thank you.
You are the man. I really enjoy your work, man. Truly, honestly, just really appreciate your work. As always, we don't have a super strict platform. Whatever comes through is what we talk about. So, I guess really we can start off because it's appropriate, because it is the beginning of fight week, UFC 249. We've been touching on it a little bit week in and week out because it keeps getting moved and keeps getting shuffled around. But here we are. Hopefully, fingers crossed, nothing happens again. What do you think about the card, Sean? I mean, it's a massive card. It's, Ferguson and Gaethje, Cejudo and Cruz. I mean, from top to bottom, it's just a super stacked card, man. Like, what are you looking forward to the most on it?
Yeah, Josh, thank you. It's a great question. Jeff, again, thanks both of you for having me on the program, and both of you always great friends, huge supporters of mine, which means a lot to me. I'm most looking forward to seeing live fights. I've emptied the DVR. I've gone into the archives. I've watched so many old fights. I've been watching on ESPN. They were doing a Tyson marathon. They were doing the Ollie Frazier marathon. I mean, these are all fights that I've watched a ton, but they're showing the original live broadcast, and I enjoy those on two levels. As a fight hardcore, and then as someone who tries to be a student of sports commentating and sports broadcasting, having a lot of fun with that. But just to get back to live fights after exhausting my DVR, getting rid of everything, I'm down to like 14%. I'm always living at about 91% because I record so much, go on the road, and playing catch up. So to see the live fights is great. The executive director of the Florida Commission, who Jeff knows, Josh, I'm not sure if you've met him, but fantastic guy, one of the best regulators in the country, if not the world, Pat Cunningham. Pat's been doing everything right with this. And, I'm on the Kansas Athletic Commission. I always put that out. I'm not the executive director. I'm not paid for it. I'm appointed. I'm on year 6. I've been appointed by a Republican. I've been appointed by a Democrat. I keep it apolitical on that. but I get some insight being on a commission, in this case, Kansas, to how things work. Commissions can't go rogue. You're either beholden to your state government, or if you're in Canada, your provincial or your civic government, depending on the athletic commission, or if it's Native American, it's usually your chief or the CEO. It's generally the chief of the sanctioning tribe. So you can't go rogue. So Florida is doing nothing without the direct consent, involvement, and especially permission of the Florida state government. So there's nothing rogue about this. I personally believe it's time. I think UFC is setting the precedent, and a lot of people are going to follow. It was just announced today in my home state of Kansas, there's going to be a show the first week in June. Interesting hybrid show with boxing, bare knuckle, kickboxing, and MMA.
Is that Carden?
We started John Carden, that's right, John Carden and Sam Kleinbeck. Two very good local promoters are teaming up for the first time. It will be in, knock on wood, unless things go horribly wrong, and I'm an optimist by nature, so saying not, but we'll be in phase 3. We started phase 1 in Kansas on Monday, so we'll be in phase 3. The way it's going in Kansas, we can have full attendance, no restrictions on anything June 15th. So Florida, Kansas, Alaska, Georgia, South Carolina, there are states that are moving forward on this. Some people like that, some people don't. That's a political debate of which I want no part of. But the reality is Florida saw an opportunity. They're working with the UFC. The UFC saw an opportunity. They're working with Florida. And I want to get back to fights. I want to get back to work.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I am ready. You know something? I mean, I love my family, love my house, love my friends, but there's just something about being on the road, Sean. You and I both know it. It's a lifestyle that we have grown accustomed to over so many years. I mean, you are so much more well-traveled than I am, but it's just something, it's that itch. And those of you who don't live that life don't understand what it's like not to scratch that itch. And it's tough. I totally understand. I also applaud what Florida is doing. I applaud what Kansas is doing, you know, being very optimistic about starting stuff up. And of course, you know, we still have on the docket, in case things go different, BKFC, next BKFC, which we're going to try one more time on June 20th in Wichita. You know, knock on wood, hopefully that'll go off without a hitch this time, and we won't be sharing sad drinks at the end of the day. Yeah. But you know what? They weren't that sad. You know, they maybe disappointing drinks, but not sad drinks.
Yeah, we kept good company that night, Josh. We were out after that show canceled. We were with Joe Wilk. I mean, there was a lot of talent in that room. Joe Wilk, Dave Rickles, Jake Lindsay, Chris Lights Out Lytle. That was a pretty packed group in that room. Sam Shoemaker was with us. Josh Burns was there. That was a fun group, but it was a disappointing night. You know, we went in, and Josh, I'm not sure if Jeff relayed the whole story, but normally I'm getting in on the bare knuckle shows on the Wednesday night to start the production schedule on the Thursday morning. In this case, Wichita's about a 3-hour drive from where I live in the Kansas City suburbs. So I got in on the Thursday morning, went right to work. In that case, that means our fighter interviews. We didn't even find out that the show was off, BKFC, until after 5:30. It wasn't canceled by the state. Absolutely not, because my athletic commission was given the green light to go forward by the Secretary of Commerce of Kansas, a guy named David Toland, outstanding Secretary of Commerce. It certainly wasn't canceled by BKFC. It was canceled by the Sedgwick County Health Department. And I should more correctly say it wasn't even canceled. It's been postponed.
Oh, it wasn't governor. It wasn't the governor.
No, absolutely not. It was the Sedgwick County Health Department.
Oh, okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and you know, this is probably not the discussion for it, but anybody who's ever taken a political science course, I wasn't too good of a student, so I really never paid attention, but I started getting interested in this stuff well after school. But there are real vagaries of what's a democracy and what's a republic, and not to go off on a tangent, but we're seeing that in this country.
Please go off on a tangent.
Yeah.
This is what this is what we're all about.
My wife is English, and if you see what's happening in the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, says we're canceling schools, and he cancels schools. The President of the United States, no matter who it is, regardless of the party, regardless of the person, can't do that. They can't act in that federal power because we're a republic, not a democracy, so we're localized. And you're really seeing that play out through this situation. It is state to state, it is county to county, it's city to city on what happens. The governor of Kansas, Laura Kelly, has enacted phase 1 on Monday of this week. but there are some municipalities, some counties who are not entering into phase 1 yet. And I think that's confusing this even more so. And again, this isn't a political rant or a political screed. This is just talking about the way it is. So I know in talking to Pat Cunningham, he was telling me that there were counties and cities in Florida who would have shut down the UFC, be it the sheriff's department or the police department or the fire marshal or the health department would have shut it down. So it's making it difficult. Who shuts things down? Again, in the case of the postponed BKFC show on March 11th, yeah, that was Sedgwick County. It wasn't the state of Kansas, the Athletic Commission. So as people are trying to bring shows back, they have to be aware of a lot of different things. You have to be aware of your state government, your county government, your city government, maybe your city council. Then you have to look at the local health department. You have to look at the sheriff's office. You have to look at the chief of police, who this person is, city council. It can get very, very complicated, very confusing. I can tell you with 100% certainty that there are definitely cities in Florida who would not have allowed the UFC to happen. Jacksonville has been very receptive. That's why you're seeing 3 straight shows in Jacksonville.
Well, I think the right thing to do is, especially as we are reintroducing live events to the country and to the world, the methods that they have abroad are some of the best ones that I've seen. In fact, they enacted it when I was doing a show right before the show got canceled at BKFC, when I was doing an ACA show in Kazakhstan. And this was right at the boom when it really first started. And they were going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And internationally, it's even worse but the dollar speaks everywhere, and apparently it did there. But they did the smart thing as far as the precautionary. They had laser thermometers at every entrance. They had anybody who was 99.5, I believe it was sent home. And they did keep they had a person in every other seat and not right next to each other. And I think that if we as a country start moving forward and start taking the necessary safety precautions, we are going to see the live events thrive. But it's just something that we have to get used to at this time, because Sean, you and I both know, and you know as well, Josh, this is a time that we've never experienced in our life. We've never, ever seen anything like this, to where something has literally shut the world down. And as we come back from that, and as we're healing from that, it's going to take time, and certain precautions are going to be necessary. But take the precautions, but don't shut down the event. Take the precautions necessary to make sure that not only the people that are holding the fight are going to be good, but also the athletes and the people attending. I think as long as those precautions are taken, we're golden.
Yeah, I think, guys, that we're facing a reality probably in the next 6 months, and this isn't just combat sports, this is all sports, where some municipalities, some counties, certainly some states, are going to be closed to uncapped attendance, whether that be a concert, sporting event, right, whatever, movie theater even, and others will. I mean, it's difficult to predict, and I'm not in the prediction business, but it's not that difficult to see a situation where come this NFL season, Arrowhead Stadium might be allowed with 80,000 people, and a MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, maybe they're putting a cap there. Maybe the stadiums on the West Coast have different guidelines than the stadiums in the South in the NFL. Reading an article today, fascinating, about college football, and that the college football season's in potential jeopardy. But would that be the entire country, or would that be conference to conference, region to region? Because the reality of what we've experienced in Kansas is far different from the reality of what people are experiencing in Washington State, or what they're experiencing in New Jersey. And that makes this even more confusing, even more difficult for a lot of people.
Let me ask you this, Sean, before we move too far away from it. So you were talking about, like, in Kansas, like phase 3 and stuff like that. When the current postponed date for bare knuckle, right, in June, by then, like phase 3, I guess, does that mean, is that still an empty arena show that it would be, or like a limited capacity, or what do you think exactly that means in pertaining to?
So from the governor, Laura Kelly, governor of Kansas, June 15th starts phase 4, what she's calling, what the state is calling phase out. Okay. Phase out is the end of all restrictions. Now, of course, that's subject to change. because if there's a sudden uptick in cases or a swath of deaths or something else happens in the unforeseen, then we're not going to that. But best case scenario, if this plays out, June 15th, we go to quote unquote normal, or as I like to say around my house, quote unquote, we all need, quote unquote, we all need to get back to abnormal in my case. But it's the full, it's full attendance, no restrictions, no social distancing, no gloves, no masks, no anything. Obviously, they'll caution people, if you're feeling ill, stay home. If you have a compromised immune system, be careful. But that's kind of good advice for life, the way that I see that. Yeah. Now, what complicates this further, again, as I talk about the whole fun conversation of what's a democracy and what's a republic. In theory, and I don't think it will happen, in theory, we could be at phase 4 or phase out in Kansas, but certain counties and municipalities say we don't feel that we're ready. Also, what confuses it is the vast majority of venues that hold fights across the country are privately owned, or at least partially privately owned. There might be a partnership with the government, but usually there's a private entity. And if that private entity feels that they're at a strong risk for lawsuit in case of death or in case of illness, something like that, catastrophic event, they don't have to open back up. You know, that, and that's something too, is that you see in 2 weeks, I plan on being at the gym for the first time in a long time, which is making me mental. But I need to be back in the gym. I don't know that my gym chain will open up. I hope that they do. It's a chain where I work out at.
You're doing just fine. There's no double chin on you, Sean. Come on.
I thank you. I hope that they know I'm deflating. Actually, I'm deflating. I go the other way. I think I'm going to be fighting at 135 pounds at 6'2" by the time I'm done with this. But so that's another confusing thing. So even though the state of Kansas, in the county of Johnson, in the city of Shawnee where I live, says it's okay, will the gym chain where I train, will they open up? And then my MMA gym, which is a one-off privately owned, they probably will too, but they all have to do their risk assessment. So every venue has to do their risk assessment, because if they're a publicly traded company, they have shareholders or they have a board of directors. So there's so many confusing issues in this.
No, you know what? And I was just listening to something today, and they were kind of touching on around about what you're saying, where, you know, some governors are saying 2 years. It could be another 2 years before we get back to normal. Some governors are ready to get back to normal today, right? And it's
absolutely.
And then there's a whole stuff in between. You know, like you said, depending on the different localities and the state and this and that and all these different numbers, and, you know, what numbers are true, what numbers aren't true, because
that just proves it, Josh. We just don't know. We just don't.
Right.
We just don't know. I mean, you guys know that everything changes daily. Yeah. They just don't know. So everything as of right now is is just speculation.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Jeff. It is speculation. I don't mean to demean anything, but I'm a huge fan of World War II. I read on history so much on World War II. I think the closest that we have to a precedent in this country is World War II. And the reason is other traumatic events that we've had in this country since World War II have essentially been an isolated event, and they have a stop date. And then it's really how we deal with it as individuals, as families, as a society, as a country with that event. World War II was open-ended. When the U.S. entered World War II in December of 1941, we didn't know if it was going to be over in 1943 or 1953. We didn't know if the Nazis were going to successfully take over Great Britain and Churchill was going to succeed. We didn't know how far Japan would push into the Pacific if they'd reach the West Coast. So it was a lot of speculation. And again, it's not an apples to apples comparison, right, but I think it's true in that we're all speculating. And there's been a lot of speculation from the beginning. This will go on for another year. This will be over once the warm weather hits. We're just guessing. I'm an optimist by nature. You guys know me. I'm one of the more optimistic people around. Yeah. So I'm always thinking everybody's going to be great. We're going to be back to work. I'm ready to roll on this, because the alternative isn't that great to think about.
Well, think about it. I mean, if there's anybody that I know of that's always on the Yellow Brick Road, it would definitely be you, my friend. That's for sure. But now, Josh, I'm going to take over for a second, and I'm going to take us on to a very positive tangent. We went off on that tangent, and it was kind of positive and negative. But now we're going full on positive, and I'm going to talk to my boy about a very interesting read that he definitely knows about. And of course, I'm talking about Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it. And of course, we're talking about the book from Art Davie and ghostwritten by my very good friend right here, Sean Wheelock. Sean, you know, I don't know if you talked to me about this. Sean and I have been friends now, I think about 6 years now.
Yeah.
I think we've known each other for about 6 years, since 2014, if I believe is when we first met.
That's right.
And I don't know if you completely told me the story on how you got started on the journey with this book. So maybe you could kind of enlighten us and tell us exactly how that journey began and came to fruition with this great read.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, Jeff. So I think most people in your listening audience know who Art Davie is, but if you don't, Art Davie is the man who created and was the first owner of the UFC. And obviously there's a lot of misinformation out there, but Art Davie was an advertising executive. In the fall of 1989, he was assigned a campaign for Tecate Beer, their US distributor, and to create a campaign for Tecate Beer. And Art Davie is a lifelong fight fan and someone who had boxed Golden Gloves as a kid when he was in Brooklyn, New York. Thought, I want to create something which brings all these martial arts and fighting disciplines together. We'll do a one-night tournament. We'll call it World's Greatest Fighter, and I'll pitch it to Tecate, and they will love it, and we're going to have a hit. And Art pitched it to Tecate, and they're like, yeah, no, this is a terrible idea. We hate this. We don't want anything to do with that. But Art Davie was undaunted, and he would not let the idea go. And in his spare time, he continued to work on it to the point where it took over his life, and he wound up quitting his job, taking his savings and going all in. And he sought out Rorion Gracie, wound up training at the Gracie Academy, got his blue belt under Royler Gracie. That's where he met people like Big John McCarthy and met the entire Gracie family. Hoist Gracie, of course, Hickson, the father Elio Gracie. He was someone who was completely driven on this. So they formed a partnership, a holding company called WOW, which was then changed to, they said they were going to call it War of the Worlds, from World's Best Fighter. That was the working title then for the UFC. So they found WOW Promotions, War of the Worlds Promotions, Art Davie and Rorion Gracie, and then they sold 10% off to mainly friends, family, and Gracie Jiu-Jitsu students, 10%, where they raised $112,500. And those were the original owners of the UFC. And they owned it through UFC 5. Art Davie then sold out to Bob Meyerowitz, who owned Semaphore Entertainment Group, was the pay-per-view provider. Bob Meyerowitz 2 weeks later realized he didn't know how to run a fight company and immediately hired Art Davie back. And then Art was there through UFC Japan through 1997. But the book chronicles in Art's voice, it's his story in his first person, the 4 years of Art's life, essentially from that first pitch meeting with Tecate in the fall, September of 1989 through November 12th, 1993 in the very first UFC. And it's amazing how Art had to take out ads in magazines like Black Belt and Inside Karate and Inside Kung Fu to find fighters because people were telling him no. You know, people who seem like very bad men who would throw down with anybody. People like Bart Vale told him no. Dennis Alexio told him no. Benny the Jet Urquidez told him no. Art kept calling Dan Gable, who was 44 at the time. Didn't think that Dan Gable would be in it, but can you hook me up with someone who's a top wrestler? Dan Gable never even returned his phone call. Probably thought, who's this kook who keeps calling me up? Art Davie was told no constantly, was told no by HBO, Showtime, ESPN, even Prime Ticket. Finally was able to get it on pay-per-view and launch this tournament. So the book, Is This Legal?, tells that story. It's been optioned for a movie. We have a director attached. A really good script. I did not write the script. I'm not a screenwriter, but fantastic script. Knock on wood again. Moving along. Hopefully this will be a film and I'll have film news very soon. But I truly love Art Davie. We speak every day. I spoke to him about 2 hours ago. He's kind of become my surrogate father, and I've kind of become his surrogate son. And the book was an outgrowth of our friendship and our relationship. And it's the thing that I'm most proud of in my life after my family.
Listen to that. Listen, how beautiful is that? And it's funny, you said along Art's journey to make the UFC into fruition. And, I'll never forget, I remember I was almost 16 years old. I was 15 when I first saw that on November 12th, 1993. And I remember when I first saw it, it was unlike anything that I had seen before. There was no comparison. Yeah. There was no comparison to that show that I could remember. And I had watched the tough man stuff. I had watched I'd watched kickboxing. I had watched every form of combat sports leading up to the UFC. And I just remember seeing this, and I'm like saying to myself, man, this is something special. But, it's kind of funny because you mentioned, at the beginning, of course, Art had so many no's. No. Yeah. Sean, sounds a little familiar, huh? Kind of sounds like familiar territory to our buddy, Mr. David Feldman, huh?
Yeah, no, I've told David Feldman, I said, you're living Art Davie's life 25 years later. And it's the same comparisons. There was a guy named Jim Coleman who was a leading martial arts writer. Remember, not mixed martial arts. We're talking about the early 90s. Martial arts writer in the country. And he wrote an article saying it was dirty fighting. Bill Wallace, who Art Davie paid $10,000 to do play-by-play on the first event. After the first event, then he writes an op-ed saying that he'll never be involved again. Not that they were going to invite him back after that on-air performance, but saying he would never be involved again and what a disgrace this was to the martial arts. People attacking Art Davie, not, wow, this is great. You're actually going to pay these guys. You're going to showcase, but, you're bringing shame upon the martial arts. This is a disgrace. The title Is This Legal comes from the fact that Rorion Gracie knew Chuck Norris. They weren't friends, but they were friendly, and they had crossed paths on seminars. And Chuck with Tang Soo Do and Hoist with, obviously, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And there had been a little bit of cross-training. I think Chuck may have rolled either with Rorion or Hickson a couple of times. But the relationship was strong enough that they could get a pitch meeting. And Art just wanted Chuck Norris's involvement. He didn't think Chuck would want to fight. I think Chuck was in his 50s by this point. Mm-hmm. But would Chuck show up? Would he be an ambassador? Would he be a commentator? Would he sit in the front row and smile? Just as my 14-year-old likes to say, get his clout, just to get the clout of Chuck Norris. And you have to think, Chuck Norris is unfortunately kind of turned into a national joke now. But in the late 80s, early 90s, man, Chuck Norris was right there really with Schwarzenegger and Stallone for being a top action star. So to have Chuck Norris involved, so Chuck Norris lives in Tarzana, California. Art and Rorion drive out to his mansion, and Chuck just keeps saying, yeah, but is this legal? It's like, are the police going to come? It's like, you're going to do what? The guys they're not going to wear gloves? You can mount somebody and punch him in the face? And what, is this legal? And that's where the book title comes from. So, we're awesome. Talking not even 28 years ago to where Chuck Norris, then one of the biggest stars in America, thinks if he gets involved that the sheriff's department or the local cops might come to this being a mainstream sport that sold for $4.2 billion. It's absolutely insane. And it is. It's the evolutionary arc of what David Feldman has gone and is continuing to go through with bare knuckle 25 years later.
So for those who are looking to get the audiobook or probably try to find this online, where would you point them to, Sean?
So we don't have an audiobook. Here's what we did, because the book is.
Excuse me. I thought it had been adapted already. Audiobook.
No. Just the adaptations of the film. I hope the audiobook is coming. But Art and I made the decision to buy up the remaining inventory, and it's a rights issue that I won't bore anybody with. Okay. You can still find it at Barnes & Noble. You can still find it at Amazon. I will tell you that the best price is to buy directly through us, and you can get an autographed copy from Art. It's Is This Legal, thebook.com. Is This Legal, thebook.com. I know that's a long domain name, but that's what we could get. And you can buy the book directly. It will be shipped directly from Art Davie. He'll autograph it for you. Again, you can find it at Barnes & Noble. You can find it on Amazon, but it's not going to be the best price. And our anticipation is once this becomes a movie, we'll do a new edition with a new foreword, and whoever winds up starring as Art Davie in the movie will put his face on the book cover and hopefully get a second life with the book.
Well, what we'll do, just to make it easy, I'll put the link in the description. That way they don't even have to remember. They can just click on it. So
that would be great. That would be great. And I'm someone who loves history. I love origin stories, and I had so much fun writing this book because even though Art and I were very close when we started writing the book, there were so many unanswered questions to me. And Jeff, like you, I watched it on November 12th, 1993. I still have the VHS copy, not the one that came out 2 years later from Vidmark, but I was nerdy enough not only to record it on a blank Sony VHS, but to keep it 27 years later and keep a functioning VCR. Nerdy enough to do that. But I wanted to know, why Denver? Why an 8-man tournament? Why the Octagon? Why did you get a sumo wrestler? Why did Art Jemerson wear one glove? Why did Ken wear his pancrase boots? I wanted to know all these whys. So I wrote this as much as a fan as I did as someone who works in the industry. And again, I could not be more pleased with the book. People have been very nice to us. I think on Amazon, I think out of 5, I think we have a 4.9 review. Every review we have is 4s and 5s. I tried to do a work. Everybody I kept asking who were friends, I'd say, go on there and write a review saying how great the book is. Not one of those people did it, but at least I know that all of the reviews are shoots. They're all authentic. They're actually people, say, verified customer, people I don't know who read the book and they really responded favorably to it, which means a lot to me.
Well, I feel bad that I haven't read the book as of yet, and I do apologize for that because
No,
I definitely want to keep. I want that to be a strong read. But I do have one question that I'm sure a lot of people who will be listening about this, because for those of us who were around during the UFC days, that were teenagers and were able to understand the complexity and the awesomeness of the first UFC, is there anywhere mentioned in the book? Because a lot of people want to know. The idea for the UFC was that really, I guess, kind of influenced or inspired by the movie Bloodsport?
Yeah, no, not at all. It's so funny you said that, Jeff, because last night when Art and I were talking, Art had just finished watching Bloodsport. I think it was on Vice. And he was laughing about years later, Frank Dukes started telling anybody who would listen, the real Frank Dukes, not Jean.
Oh, yeah.
Real right. Frank Dukes, that Art Davie kept calling him and he refused to go in the tournament because I guess he was going to kill everybody. And Art was like, nah, I never called Frank Dukes. Now, Zane Frazier, who was in and lost to Kevin Rozier in the quarterfinals in UFC 1, Zane Frazier, who had been a bodyguard, who was a Kenpo black belt. He'd been a bodyguard, actually, for Stevie Wonder for some point, fairly well known on the celebrity circuit in Hollywood. Art first knew Zane Frazier. Zane Frazier had been at a martial arts trade show in Los Angeles and actually gotten in a throwdown with Frank Dukes and threw Frank Dukes over a table. And the word kind of spread that Zane Frazier is a pretty bad man, and Art sought out Zane Frazier. And Frank Trejo was his coach, and Frank Trejo knew Rorion Gracie, Art's partner. But no, Art didn't even see Bloodsport. Another myth on that is that John Milius designed the cage because of Conan the Barbarian. The story is that John Milius, phenomenal director. It's a shame more people,
kind of like the pit scenes
right.
at the beginning.
Yeah,
of
it's a shame more people don't know John Milius. John Milius should be as well known as Steven Spielberg or Martin Scorsese. John Milius wrote Apocalypse Now with Francis Ford Coppola, which he was nominated for an award. He directed Conan the Barbarian. He directed Red Dawn, which is one of the best 80s films of all time. Red Dawn's amazing. Not the remake, the original Red Dawn.
The Patrick Swayze Red Dawn.
Patrick Swayze, absolutely. John Milius was a student at the Gracie Academy and would do privates with Rorion. Wouldn't take classes, but would do privates. Art got to be friendly with John Milius. They were about the same age. They were two of the older guys at the Gracie Academy. I think Milius was in his 50s. Art was in his 40s. Most of the students there were in their 20s and 30s, like John McCarthy. And Art Davie pitched the concept to John Milius, said, I just need to say that you're with us. I don't need you to do anything. I just need to be able to go into meetings and say, John Milius, and Art gave him the term creative director, and Art said, coming from advertising, he liked that term because they always had a creative director at an ad agency. So John Milius was listed as the creative director. If you go back and you watch UFC 1, it'll say creative director John Milius. John Milius wouldn't accept any money. Art Davie wound up giving him some very expensive Cuban cigars as a thank you, but he would not accept any money. Didn't even come out to the first event. John Milius' son, Ethan, who's now a district attorney in Los Angeles, was 18 or 19 at the time, and he came out and was Art Davie's gopher for the week. just essentially being the Art Davie personal assistant, which just must have been an amazing thrill. I talked to Ethan when I was writing this book to make sure I got things right about his dad. The recollections were correct. But John Milius did not design the cage, was not even involved in that. Milius was, as I say, was there if Art just kind of needed to throw some big picture ideas off of. But I think they had 2 meetings the whole time. But it was just saying, I have John Milius on my creative team. John Milius is behind it. He wrote a letter of recommendation. So that's a myth or an urban legend. John Milius designed the pitch.
Jason Cusson, right? Wasn't
Jason Cusson, Greg Harrison, and Jason Cusson. Now, it's very, very possible. Jason Cusson works for Combate Americas. It's very possible that one or both of those guys saw Conan the Barbarian, like a lot of us did who were alive in the 1980s, and that inspired. But, inspiration, creativity comes from a lot of different places. What Art wanted, and Art wasn't directly involved in designing it. In fact, Art did not even see the Octagon until it was set up the day before in Denver. Rorion Gracie was insistent that you can't have a boxing ring. It was like he had sparred guys in a boxing ring. He knew that was wrong for jiu-jitsu. They also thought if you see a boxing ring, you either think this is boxing or this is pro wrestling. They wanted something different. They wanted something iconic. Art just wasn't exactly sure what it would be. In the book, we have a lot of these sketches, these different concepts. Some sketches Art actually did himself. But yeah, Custon and Harrison were the 2 guys. They worked a lot as set designers on the concerts for Semaphore Entertainment Group. And they were mainly doing music concerts as their pay-per-view business.
Right.
Really as set designers. And they came up with the idea. Art loved it. The Semaphore guys loved it. And they constructed it. The punchline of this story is after the first event, Bob Meyerowitz, who wasn't even there, who wound up becoming the owner, didn't even bother to show up. But Bob Meyerowitz gave the directive, tear it down and throw it away, because he's thinking like a live events guy. Show's over, on to the next town, break it down. And they were going to throw it in a dumpster. And Art said, absolutely not. So Art got the cage deconstructed, found storage space in Denver and held on to it, or that thing would have been probably put in a dumpster in the back of McNichols Arena. It's amazing on that in the cost, but it certainly is iconic. I remember, and Jeff, if you had this same impression, when that show started, just by seeing the cage, you knew that this was something different. It set the tone. It sent the message immediately. Wow, I've never seen anything like this. Because if we saw a boxing ring, we're thinking pro wrestling or we're thinking boxing. If we see a mat, we're thinking probably amateur wrestling or taekwondo.
But we're seeing a cage.
Really special about
the last time I remember seeing anything in a cage, especially back then, is when I was watching Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Yeah, exactly. And again, when you look at Harrison and Cusson, did they watch Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome? Probably. Did they watch Bloodsport? Probably. Did they watch Conan the Barbarian? Probably. But it wasn't inspired. It
wasn't directly inspired.
Absolutely not. It's a confluence of ideas. References. Yeah. But Art had some very interesting ideas. He thought about putting a moat, and he would put lemon sharks in. Lemon sharks look fierce, but they're not really going to hurt anybody. Or piranhas. If piranhas, and I didn't know this, but Art told me if piranhas are well fed, they're not going to attack anybody.
Oh no.
They thought about shock plates. So if you stepped out, that you would get a shock. But apparently there was a pathologist who was one of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu students who said, if you have sweaty bodies on these plates, they're probably going to go into cardiac arrest. So that's a bad idea. They talked about an elevated platform. They talked about a net coming down over a boxing ring. So the idea was we need to do something different, something that looks kind of futuristic, but also like ancient pancration from early Athens Olympics.
That's more like Japanese hardcore stuff. That's more like Japanese hardcore wrestling from the 90s.
Right.
Like the piranha death matches or the cactus death matches. Yeah, or the exploding time bomb death matches. That would have been interesting, but I absolutely see that, because that would have actually made it a 100% freak show, and I don't think it would have been allowed to ascend to something legitimate if something like that had happened.
I think business partnerships can be a lot like marriages, in that you have to have 2 people aspiring to common goals, but very different perspectives. And Art really found that in Rorion Gracie, and they're friends to this day. They don't see each other a lot, but Art will tell me, oh, I just got a call from Rorion. He usually wants to speak about the Gracie diet, or he'll get a text from him. But Horion was rooted in the tradition of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. He wanted to put over his father. He wanted to put over Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. You know, he really saw the honor in that. Art was a guy who wound up, again, getting his blue belt from Royler Gracie training there. But the only reason Art was training there, and he'll admit this, is because he wanted to get in good with the Gracies and get into business with them. Art was an advertising guy who had boxed as a teenager in the Golden Gloves and, by his own admission, not very successfully. So you had the push-pull of Art wanting to go big. Let's have a moat with sharks. And Horion saying, no, we need to be a little more realistic. The biggest difference between the two is that Horion Gracie wanted to put over Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which he did, right? He did. 27 years later, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is, no disrespect, but it's Burger King or it's Starbucks or it's 7-Eleven. It's a franchise. It's a chain. We all know it. And I don't mean to disparage it in any way by saying that, but it's extremely well known. Went from absolute obscurity to being a household name. Art Davie did not care who won UFC 1. He liked Hoist. He knew Hoist really well. But Art would have been just as happy if Art Jimerson would have knocked Hoist Gracie unconscious and gone on and fought in the next round. Art Gracie wanted a show. He wanted a spectacle. He viewed it as the promoter. And that was the push-pull that they had. And that dynamic certainly worked through the first 5 years.
You know, it's funny. You could also kind of really compare the first UFC to the first WrestleMania. You know, everybody looked at it as a huge gamble. But, I mean, if you remember, I mean, you know, there were celebrities there. You know, it was bringing shoot fighting to light. It was basically cockfighting except with people. And it was also something that no one had ever seen. And there were just so many people that were saying, man, this is a hell of a gamble. This is a hell of a gamble. Either it's going to work or it's going to bomb. And it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. And I think the reason why it took the UFC so long to put Art in the Hall of Fame, he got inducted 2 years ago, and I was so incredibly pleased and proud when Art asked me to induct him and be his presenter for that. But, you know, the creator and original owner, and it took him until 2018 to get in, but at least he's in, no complaints. But the reason I think that Art Davie really has not gotten his due is because the ideal was right there. It was so simple. How did it take until 1993 to have this? Because, look, whatever happened in Brazil with Vale Tudo, whatever happened in Japan with strong style and with shoot fighting, whatever happened in the 1930s carnival circuit with catch wrestling, that wasn't MMA because there was always a caveat. The reality was that punchers wanted a rule set, or I should say more correctly, strikers wanted a rule set. They kept the fight on the feet. They did not want to be taken down. They did not want to be held down. They certainly didn't want to be submitted. And grapplers, whether they were coming from catch wrestling or Greco or judo or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, they wanted a rule set where they could get the fight to the ground. They did not want to get punched, kicked, kneed, and elbowed in the face. So if you look at bouts historically, the people say, oh, that was the first MMA. You know, Inoki Ali, that was the first MMA. Milo Savage versus Juno Gene LaBelle, that was the first MMA. Cowboy Latrell versus Jack Dempsey. None of it was, because if you dig deep, there was always this rule set. Well, you can go on the ground, but only for 5 seconds. Well, you can't punch with an open hand. Look, I love what they were doing in Japan in the 80s and early 90s, pre-November 12th, 1993. That wasn't MMA. You could not punch on the ground. You could not punch standing. You could only slap. There were rope escapes. That wasn't MMA. It was close, but it wasn't MMA. The very first MMA event was UFC 1, November 12th, 1993. We were writing the book. I asked Art, have you ever stopped to think you invented a sport? And he said, I never even thought I invented a sport until you asked me that question. Art never really saw it that way. He saw the UFC as the confluence of a lot of different sports coming together. Kind of like Vale Tudo. The difference is Vale Tudo was never organized, and Vale Tudo had a very floaty rule set. You know, Josh, if you and me are going to fight each other in Vale Tudo, it's going to be one rule set. But if you and Jeff are going to fight each other in Vale Tudo, it's going to be another rule set. But Art never set out to create a new sport. He just set out to create this crazy new sporting event. And he thought it would be a franchise. He thought it would explode, and it did. And, you know, another urban legend or myth and unfortunately it was propagated by the UFC for a while after Art was gone, as this was a one-night tournament. In the book, we show the contracts. The original contract, the pay-per-view contract, called for events all the way through 1997. It was a 4-year deal. It was never meant to be a one-night event. Now, had it tanked, had it bombed, it would have been one and done. But Art Davie's intent was always, we're going to create not a new sport, which he did, but a new sports promotion, a new sports entity, which is going to keep coming back. Art always likes to say the apex predator. We're going to find the apex predator every time. We're going to keep hunting. We're going to find that apex predator, the king of the kings.
Let me ask you something, Sean. If you took Art and dropped him into current UFC with the current situation, what's going on now, and let's just, put him in there, do you think that he would be as, aggressive with wanting to put on a show as Dana has been? You think it'd be the same thing?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about it. This is a man who moved the show to Dothan, Alabama on 24 hours notice. When he was in Tulsa, Oklahoma for UFC 4, he had to get both a civil attorney and a criminal defense attorney. When he was doing a show in Detroit, they put a warrant out for his arrest. So 100% he would have made this happen. And Art's so respectful of the UFC. His words, not mine. He says, it's like I had a kid, I gave it up for adoption, and it became the president of the United States of America. That's how he sees the UFC now.
Good analogy.
This idea in his head in 1989, and when he started, he's in an office with Kathy Kidd and a woman named Sherry Santos as his secretary. Rorion Gracie didn't keep an office there. He was next door in Torrance, California at the Gracie Academy. But a 3-person, 2-room office, and it becomes a company that sells for over $4 billion with hundreds of employees and international presence. Amazing. I always remind Art, I'll do a show in Ingushetia, where, Jeff, I know in Sunni Muslim Southern Russia, Ingushetia, where I've been a few times. I'll say, Art, I'm here because of you. And then I'll do a show in Rio de Janeiro. I'm here because of you. And I'm in Finland. I'm here because of you. And that's the reach that it had. I think if it weren't Art Davie, we were moving towards that. Something was going to give and someone was going to put it together, and Art will freely admit this, especially with all the stuff that was happening in Japan, which was getting close, although there were a ton of works over there too, which further complicated it. So it may not have been 1993, it may have been 1999. I think there would be some sort of mixed match fighting. I don't know that we would call it MMA. I don't know that there would be a company as big as the UFC, but I think it was almost an eventuality that there was going to be some form of mixed match fighting, pretty close to resembling what we have now with MMA.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, Josh, it's time for another tangent to go off of, because we can't be too consistent. Otherwise people will stop listening.
Well, I tell you, I kind of want to pick your brain on this weekend, UFC 249. We don't have to go with the whole card, but I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts on really the main and co-main, maybe cliche, but I'm kind of curious to hear, Cruz and Cejudo, and then of course the main event, Ferguson and Gaethje. What do you think about those matchups, man?
Yeah, they're both phenomenal, aren't they? Really phenomenal, and credit to the UFC for coming back with such a card. Cejudo has become such a good mixed martial artist. I think newer fans either have forgotten or never really learned what a phenomenal wrestler he was. And it's funny when you see lists of the greatest wrestlers in the history of MMA. I don't know why Henry Cejudo gets left off of that list. But the evolution of the Henry Cejudo from the first Demetrius Johnson fight to the second Demetrius Johnson fight, he is phenomenal. He's so well-rounded. Why he's not talked more about as the pound-for-pound king in the sport, I'm not sure. Maybe he will be with a strong performance on this show. That is a great fight. Justin Gaethje, it's weird. I was having a conversation with someone earlier today who used to work for World Series of Fighting, and I was talking about Justin Gaethje. And, World Series of Fighting had some really great fighters. I mean, they brought people in who are already well-known, people like Jake Shields, obviously, and then Blagoy Ivanov was in World Series of Fighting, David Branch and Marlon Moraes. But Justin Gaethje has the fighting style that if you don't like, you're probably not a fighting fan. it's all out. And, the guy was a Division I college wrestler. He's very skilled. He is so aggressive. I think sometimes people overlook to their peril his skill and his ability. But he's that quintessential fighter that I'm either going to finish or get finished, and people really respond to. It's an amazing card. And even the prelims, I was looking at the prelim card, just what's going to be on for free on ESPN. I mean, Jacare is on the free prelims? That is insane. I mean, I understand that he's not the Jacare of 3 years ago, but he's still Jacare. He's still one of my
Cowboys on the prelims.
Hey, Cowboys Fridays on the prelims, yeah.
No, that's unprecedented.
Credit to the UFC. They recognize the pent-up demand. I'm a little surprised, and tell me if you guys are, that this is still a pay-per-view. I don't know if there was any internal discussion about let's just put it on.
Josh actually said that. Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I thought that and again, I understand the business behind it, but I actually I was talking about that, like, if it would have been, imagine, because there's nothing else going on. Like, I get it. I get the business side of, if it would have been just, say, I suggested, just throw it on ESPN Plus or something. Even if you didn't just want to throw it on regular ESPN, because I think enough people would still get ESPN Plus. Was it like $5.99 a month or something? It's still not nothing. But, like, I get whatever money I think you might lose in pay-per-view revenue. Think about the future business from all the eyeballs you're going to get.
Well, the Nielsen ratings would be off the friggin' chart.
Right. Your ratings would be off the charts. You're talking advertisers and sponsors, right? Maybe like that would increase tenfold because of all the different eyeballs that are coming on. I think it should have been a free card, or at least ESPN Plus card. They didn't have to do regular TV, but even ESPN Plus, just not a pay-per-view. I think this actually would have been a good time to do it. Again, I get it. I get the business side of it because there's no ticket sales. They're not making anything off of that. There's no merchandise sales because nobody's there to buy T-shirts.
Yeah, it's a wash on the gate. I
get that. But I think that
Josh, I'll tell you. I'm sorry, go ahead. Then I'll tell you a big picture thought that I've had for quite some time on this. And this is something I talked a lot with Art Davie about too. But go ahead, please. I cut you off.
No, that's pretty much it. I was just saying that I think that the future eyeballs, almost, if you want to look at it as let's just call it an investment, right? You're putting it on ESPN Plus, which is way more accessible for $5.99 versus whatever, $69.99, $59.99, whatever it is. It's way more accessible, way more available, especially in the times where, a lot of people lost their jobs. Maybe they don't have that $60 to fork out for a pay-per-view. They need to keep that because they don't know what the hell they're going to be doing 3 months from now, 2 months from now, 6 months from now.
So, I like your line of thinking, and so this is the big picture. And when the last UFC contract was over with Fox, and they were negotiating, and there was a speculation where would they go, Art Davie and I had a lot of conversations about this. And the precedent is in the 1980s when pay-per-view was really emerging. Jeff, you talked about WrestleMania 1. And when pay-per-view was really emerging, going from closed circuit, which was in movie theaters, to pay-per-view, there was a lot of talk that the NFL would move.
Tap it over at HBO.
That's right. That's exactly right. That there was a lot of talk that the NFL would go to pay-per-view on the Super Bowl. In the short term, they would have made a tremendous amount of money, but I would tell you that the NFL, and I believe this with 100% certainty, would not be nearly as popular, nor as profitable, nor receive the TV revenue that they receive now had they gone with that temptation. Because they continue to put it out and they can increase their fan base. So what Art and I talked about before the ESPN deal was what UFC blew up the pay-per-view model. They said, we're not doing any more pay-per-views. They signed with one of the networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox, and they put all of their top cards on. UFC on Fox got picked on and the ratings were under 2 million viewers by the end, but it wasn't their A show, and sometimes it wasn't their B show. You didn't see John Jones on there. You didn't see Ronda Rousey. You didn't see George St. Pierre. You didn't see Daniel Cormier. You certainly didn't see Conor McGregor.
Oh, God, no.
What if the UFC had said, we are not going to do pay-per-view anymore. We're going to do what the NFL does. We're going to go to a couple of networks or one network, or maybe we'll go to NBC and our B shows will be on NBC Sportsnet, but we're going to do monthly pay-per-view style shows Saturday nights in prime time. Now, what happens is they lose a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars in the short term off of pay-per-view. But do you grow the ratings, 8 million, 10 million, 15 million people watching, and get all these new people into the proverbial tent? You know, I think what really hurt boxing from the 90s into the 2000s is that you could no longer watch the best fighters for free or close to free. Right. I think I'm too young to have seen it free, but I'm old enough to have been able to watch Mike Tyson and Sugar Ray Leonard and Lennox Lewis on HBO, and Oscar De La Hoya for that matter, Bernard Hopkins, Antonio Tarver on HBO and Showtime. I know that's not free, but that's also not a $99.99 pay-per-view. And
I was going to say, what do you think about like a WWE Network style thing too? You know, like
you know what, I thought that was happening too, but again, what if it's the NFL style? You know, right. I go back to it. How popular would the NFL be if games were on a paywall? You know, I was able to watch the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm a Kansas City, and in the Super Bowl with my 14-year-old daughter who had never cared anything about the NFL. We watched the Super Bowl for free. Yeah. It was on network television. We have cable, but it was for free. If I just had an antenna, we could have watched that. Think about the money that the NFL could make short term if this year they put the Super Bowl on pay-per-view. But they're long-term thinkers. So I don't know. I wonder if in the long term, if the UFC, if MMA helps themselves by saying we're done with pay-per-view, we're going to this model, we're going to go as wide as possible. It's probably unrealistic. It's probably inconceivable. And probably in 5 years, the NFL is going to be on a OTT streaming site on NFL.com or on Netflix. But I think it's interesting to think because the reality is we're all hardcore MMA fans, but we still have a niche sport. I see all these nonsensical numbers that say there are 300 million MMA fans in the world. I don't know where they are. I think and you guys know me, there's not a bigger lover or supporter of mixed martial arts on the planet than me. I'm telling you, there are probably 3 million real MMA fans in this country. 3 million out of a population of 330 million people.
Out of extreme devotion.
I think there are three, you know, watching one fight a year doesn't make you an MMA fan any more than watching Game 7 of the World Series is your only baseball, makes you a Major League Baseball fan. I think there are 3 million MMA fans in this country.
No, you follow it. So, you follow it religiously. Yes.
Right. So if you could watch monthly pay-per-views, but they're free on Fox or NBC or ABC or CBS or even HBO or Showtime, what does that number get to? 7 million, 10 million, 20 million? I think that's how you grow it. The problem is you start preaching to the proverbial choir. Boxing has been guilty of this for well over 20, going on 30 years now. We know that you're a big fan. That's why you're going to pay $69.99 or $99.99. But if you're a casual fan, are you going to do that? Yeah, maybe once. Are you gonna buy 10 pay-per-views if you're a casual fan? Probably not.
No, the casual fan will go to the restaurant or the bar and pay the $7 entrance fee to go ahead and watch it there.
Yeah, and that's why maybe our sport's not growing the way that it should be and it could be, and it was projected to be growing 20 years ago. I don't know if you guys saw this study. I think Sports Business Journal did it, but they tracked the average age of people who identify themselves as a UFC fan. And like 10 years ago, that age was 38, and 10 years later, that age was 49. Which tells you that they're not really getting any new young fans.
They're not getting that. Wow.
And it's the same group who just have continued to age on. And
well, it's the generation that started watching it and that's followed that generation is still following into the new generation, but we're still not having those younger generation fighters. I mean, fans, the next generation coming and watching the UFC like they should be.
But, you know, when I was 25, I was as fanatical about MMA as I am now. I don't know that we're the young person sport that we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. And again, that's if you're hiding behind a paywall and if you're hiding behind a large pay-per-view price and you're still living with your family or you're in high school or college or you're working an entry-level job it's tough to pay that price. It's easy to put on ABC or HBO and watch something. It's not that easy to pay $80, $90, $100 for a fight and do that multiple times a year.
I think that's why, WWE was so ahead of the curve when they came up with the network. I think they knew that eventually it would head in that direction where people are so instant, right? Instant now, the Netflix world and the Hulu world and right?
The streaming world.
The streaming world, like everything is instant now, and I can access it anywhere. If I want to watch WrestleMania from my phone, I can, right?
You can.
And I think they were so ahead of the curve on that and say, hey, maybe 10 years from now, are we going to get the $49.99 people, or can we make them pay $10 a month? Now that's still $120 a year. Now, to your point, like you were saying, I think it's the same thing with wrestling, right? Will a casual fan buy one pay-per-view a year? Maybe. Would they buy 3 or 4? Probably not. But if you word it in the way of, 3 pay-per-views, that's $120. But $9.99 times 12 months, still
you get to watch them all.
But you get to watch them all. Now that casual fan is, that $9.99 sounds a hell of a lot better than $39.99 3 times a year, right? Now you've got them that way. And I think it appeals to the people who, when they see that bigger number, and they're like, oh God, $50. I got rent coming up next week.
Especially now on top of that, like we were saying before, especially now when people are really trying to see where their dollar counts the most.
Well,
but you're absolutely right. It could change the casual fan into the hardcore fan.
Yeah, and so I go back to what if this UFC, forget ESPN Plus for a moment, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
What if this UFC were on ESPN? What if it were on ABC? What if they put it on ABC in prime time?
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Does it do 12 million viewers? Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of loss in the short term. It's maybe a huge gain in the long term. Again, I think the absolute best example is the television rights fees that the NFL gets. Would they have gotten those if they had started putting their key games on pay-per-view in the 80s? And I'm telling you that they would not. They make billions and billions of dollars a year from the television broadcast networks.
Can't argue that. I mean, you could try, but it just isn't something that's going to follow the way of technology, how we view things today. Because I still say that pay-per-view eventually, and we know this, Sean, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's going to eventually be a dying model.
Yeah, I mean, we're in such a generational shift right now. My daughters are 14 and 9. Are they ever going to subscribe to a newspaper? No chance. Are they ever going to subscribe to a magazine? No chance. What's a magazine, Dad? Right. When we were all kids, there was the difference between broadcast and cable. My kids don't understand that difference. They're just channel. Mm-hmm. It's channel 9 or it's channel 402. There is no difference. Mm-hmm. When I started my career, and if I had been on ABC as opposed to ESPN when I was a soccer commentator, that was a big day in my life. That was a big difference. Yeah. Now, who under the age of 25 or under the age of 35, for that matter, would even understand that? They're just numbers. They're just channels. Mm-hmm. You just broadcast. You just do. So there's this massive paradigm shift. It used to be that they had the Cable Ace Awards because the Emmys wouldn't recognize a show that wasn't on ABC, NBC, CBS, or Fox, so they had to have the Cable Ace Awards. Yeah. And that went away. And then there was the reluctance, we can't nominate a streaming show for an Emmy, and then that went away. And then with the Oscars, it has to be in a theater. Oh, no, now it can be in Netflix. So we're in this change probably unlike anything that we've seen since the early 1950s in terms of technology and how quickly things are changing and moving. Newspapers are dead. We all know that. CDs, DVDs, they're dead. Magazines are dead. I think what else is dead is tune in Tuesdays at 9:00. I think that fun stuff is going away.
And doesn't that suck? And doesn't that suck? One thing, Sean, I hate to interrupt, but remember, this is not an interrupting forum. You could pretty much call this the McLaughlin Group light. That's basically kind of how we go, man. We just all go, and that's the way it is. But it's kind of funny.
Wait. What did you say?
I said you could kind of call us the McLaughlin Group light.
What kind of references? What is that?
Well, you know how, they just basically have open forum chat and everybody interrupts everybody. Everybody's talking over everybody. I mean, it's basically, it's Thunderdome. It's Thunderdome and such. But Sean is so incredibly polite, incredibly polite. And Josh and I aren't used to that. So, it takes us a moment to recognize that, because we're part of the please and thank you generation as well. So it takes us a moment, and I never give a fuck what, Josh says. So it doesn't matter. But anyway, it's just so funny that generation is never going to know about the tuning in, like you said. But the one thing that I think that it so sucks that the new generation cannot know the joy of when certain artists had live music video premieres that shut down the world. For example, perfect example, when Michael Jackson had a new music video air, the entire world shut down. If people had plans, they canceled them. Kids after school, they'd be saying, "Hey, you want to come play after school?" No way. Michael Jackson, the new Michael Jackson video is airing tonight. The entire family would completely sit around. It would be an event. It would be an event. And it's just so sad to know, because of the technology advance the way it is now, that generation will never know what it's like for the entire world to shut down for a live video premiere. Think about that. I mean, there's only so many. That's only happened with only so many artists, and there's no artist right now that could do that. There's no artist that has the power overall of the music world, the entertainment world, whatever. Nobody will ever have that power to shut down the world for a premiere. Nobody.
You know what, too? And while you were saying that, and I know exactly what you're talking about, it pops in my brain because I'm thinking about like the Netflix instant, right? The instant streaming world. Mm-hmm. I can remember, HBO in the 90s when you remember, like, was it on Saturday nights at 8, they would have the brand new movie, right?
Yes.
And they would have
presentation.
They would have that. It
was like with the HBO logo on the side. It looked like the coming of God. It was almost like it would look like the coming of God, where it would pan. It would have that pan through the quiet neighborhood at night as everything sleeps, goes up into the sky, and then the stars, and then the illumination, and then God is born, and the sign.
It was an event.
No, it was, and they'll never know the joy of that. They never will. And
I'm waiting for Beetlejuice to premiere, next Saturday night, and it's oh my God.
Exactly. Oh God, Sean, tell me that you missed that, please. I do.
It's just, it's just I really try to look at media, and I hate to sound like a marketing person, but the consumption of media, which is really what we're talking about, through the eyes of my 9-year-old and my 14-year-old, and both of my daughters, they have their own bedroom. They have very large, very expensive TVs, which are virtually never put on. And if it is, it's usually to watch Netflix, because they would rather watch things through their phone or through their iPad. It's just different. It's a shift. I'm sure there was a generation that said, "What are these idiots doing looking at this TV?" And a generation said, "What are these idiots doing holding this radio? Why don't they have a proper conversation?" Right. It's just a continual emergence. Video stores. Gone, a key part of all three of our lives, because of the age group of being kids of the 80s and the 90s, and that's just a blip in history. That's gone. People 20 years older than us and 20 years younger than us never got that joy of Friday night at a video store.
Yeah, people would go out on dates at Blockbuster Video. They'd start their dates at Blockbuster Video.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%.
True story. That's where I saw my first UFC. Was at a
lot of people,
in the odd little special interest section of Blockbuster. It was the UFC.
Very, very small. The very small special interest section.
The one that when I was a kid, they had all whenever the UFC came out, that they had them all. So, and they had like weird odds and ends, like kind of like kickboxing stuff and like just different little weird things. I remember that's when I first watched UFC. It was was from Blockbuster.
Yeah, Josh, most people, I know less than 8 people, myself in that group, who watched UFC 1 live. The vast majority of people I know who are over, let's say over 30, who found the UFC founded at Blockbuster Video.
Yeah.
There was a very good deal struck with Vidmark Home Entertainment. And the first UFC wasn't actually released on VHS by Vidmark until 1995, so a full 2 years later. But Vidmark was great at getting the shows out. And then there was a time after Bob Meyerowitz purchased Art Davie, had then left the company. It was that post Art Davie working for Bob Meyerowitz and pre Fertitas and Dana White coming in, where it was largely off of pay-per-view. And the only way, unless you were in a select tiny amount of households in the U.S. with some rogue or renegade pay-per-view company, really the only way you could watch the UFC was to wait for it to come out on home video and probably go to a Blockbuster Video, which is what I had to do in that late 90s, early 2000 period.
Yeah, I miss that so much, man. That was good stuff. Yeah. Yeah, that was that.
It just brings back a lot of memories, man. Just thinking about, good memories, really good memories. Walking in and just on a Friday night and checking out the wall, and
simpler times,
just
simpler times were all we had to do. But you had to love the dynamic of how a video rental location worked, because not only did you have to pay for the membership, you also had to pay for the individual videos themselves. So you got to give it to them. It was a great screw job on the video renting patrons.
You had to pay for Blockbuster, wasn't it free?
Yeah. Okay. So Josh, I told my girls this, and so I'm the son of a single mom. My mom's retired. She was a public school art teacher, so we did not have a lot of money. And there was a place, and I call it Shawnee Video Palace because I live in Shawnee, Kansas. I have no idea. Every place was like Video Palace or Video Library or Video. Right. I don't know what it was called, but this is before we got Blockbusters in my part of the world. So this is circa 1984, 85, 86. You had to have a membership. We didn't have enough money. So my mom's neighbor, she and her husband, they had a membership. So I'd have to go in there and lie and say that they were my parents. And how's your dad doing? Oh, he's great. So I could watch the Karate Kid Part 2. And I've told my daughters this. It's like, I have a great business model. I'd like to rent a movie, please. Okay, that'll be $100. $100 to rent a movie? No, you have to pay me $100 to pay me $3.99 to rent a movie. Yep. And God forbid you fail to rewind, because that's another 50 cents. Gee, what could go wrong with that business model? I have to pay you $100 to become a member for the right to pay you $3.99 to get Romancing the Stone. It's unbelievable.
Oh, Sean,
there's a fascinating article.
And God forbid if you lost it. God help you if you lost the video and you say I don't have it. Oh, that's $100, $100+ right there.
There's a phenomenal article. It's a couple of years old now about the life and death of Blockbuster Video. It's either on Slate or Wired. I'm not a regular reader of either website, but somebody sent me, or I found this article, and they talked about Blockbuster. One of the reasons why Blockbuster took over the video store market is they did not have memberships, but those early days and being in suburban Kansas City, chains were a little late to come to my part of the world. So every video store we had was a one-off. It was a privately owned one-off. There was a Video Concepts, a Video Library, Video Castle, like I was saying, Video Palace, Video Circus. They were all mom and pop one-off stores. And it was like joining a country club. Not that I was ever at a country club or allowed in or had enough money to do that as a kid, but you had to pay to be a member. And then, of course, there was that sketch room that was either behind the beads or behind the black curtain, which is the old 21 room.
Wait, I have a story on that. So, all right, let me tell. All right, or you can continue, or I'll tell my story.
No, you go right ahead.
Okay, all right. So, and well, however embarrassing somebody might find this, I think it's hilarious now. At the time, I didn't. So, the mysterious back room at one of the local videos. This one wasn't a Blockbuster. It was
no, Blockbuster wouldn't even do NC-17. I know Blockbuster.
Like, I don't know, like Movie Time or Movie. So I don't remember. But anyway, it was like a local place. And of course there was the back room, 18 plus only room, and I can remember, as a 14, 15-year-old going, I'm like, I'm gonna go in there one day and check it out. And so I remember I turned 18 and I'm like, I can go in that room now. So I remember going in there, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, holy shit. Mind you, this is pre-internet, so this is you didn't have access to stuff like this unless unless you found a tape laying around somewhere, or like, so this was an entirely different ball game. Like it wasn't like I can just go boop boop boop. Ooh, it wasn't like that, Anyway, so I'm looking around, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna rent this. I'm 18 now. I'm an adult. Yeah. I go to the counter, and I checked it out with like I got like, I forgot what it was, but I got like a dirty movie, then I got like something normal, like I don't know, like Lethal Weapon 4 or something. I don't remember. And
to downplay it, right?
yeah, right. And I handed it to the lady. And the lady that was there, her like back was to me, and I guess they were like, 9 times out of 10 they were always doing something else, like rewinding the tapes, or whatever. So, and when she turned around, it was one of my friend's mom, and she worked there, and she goes, "Oh, hey Josh, how are you?" And I'm like, I'm good. And she goes, "Oh," so and she's opening up to check the tape. She goes, "Oh, okay. Will this be for 2 nights or?"
Oh man, you gotta tell that story a little bit better on one part, Josh, because you said when you went to get the title, you had like 2 fingers, and you were like, because the porno boxes back then were huge. They're these big, big oversized pink boxes, man. It's like taking a cereal box off the shelf.
No, yeah. No, yeah, they were like, the shell was like, the shell to those things were like, they were freaking huge. But yeah, because I remember the way they did it was, you didn't actually grab the original case of the video. They put it in like a plastic.
Yeah, it was always the one that was on the shelf, because then they could put it in the little plastic case for you. Yeah.
The dirty movies was a different color from the rest of it. So it was like blue or pink or something.
Or orange or something, yeah.
Or something like that. So like, I had the dirty one underneath the red and I just slided the movies to her. And yeah, when she turned around and I saw it was my friend's mom, and she looked at that, and I'm like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. It was just, and I'm like,
that's outstanding.
How's I think Sean or something, I can't remember. Hey, how's Sean doing? Oh, he's good.
Yeah, there's no normal conversation after that. At least at that point, that's for sure.
Never went over Sean's house again.
That is for sure. But another thing I'd like to touch base on is that normally we, like I said, Sean, you are our second guest on Loudmouth Fisticuffs, and of course, you know that I am a huge pro wrestling mark, as well as Josh, and Sean is also a huge wrestling mark like the rest of us. But Sean actually takes it a step further, because back in 2018, I remember that you had a column on the Wrestling Observer, Shooter Work. And I remember reading the first one that I just thought was fascinating, and it was a Shooter Work write-up on Andre the Giant versus Chuck Webner, man. So I'm just wondering, that was very well written. I mean, from a hardcore wrestling fan, it brought up a lot of questions about that particular scenario. Why didn't that push a little further? I would have loved to have seen more on that.
I did too with Wrestling Observer. They're great people. I went into it just to gauge response, and I'm actually trying to do a book on that. So part of this downtime, I've been writing more chapters. Mm-hmm. So it was maybe a bit disingenuous on my part. I talked to a lot of different websites. I felt like they were the best ones. Dave Meltzer is a very good guy, helped me get there. I just wanted to get out a couple almost as demos to see if there would be any type of response, any buzz, and there was very favorably reacted. So I'm trying to turn it into a book right now. Shooter Work. Basically, the premise is I'm obsessed, and I mean obsessed with works. People confuse fixes and works all the time. Very simply,
sure.
A work is when the outcome is predetermined and both participants are in on it. A fix is when the outcome is predetermined and both participants are not in on it. You can have a fix where one is in. That one could be the winner. It could be the loser. You can have fixes where nobody is in. You know, an example of what people would think would be a fix would be Ali Liston 2. I personally, I think Liston lost for a lot of reasons, considering he was a hardcore heroin addict at the time. But there was never talk about collusion with Muhammad Ali. It's one-way traffic on a fix. Wepner Andre the Giant was a work. That wasn't a fix. There was collusion. Ali versus Antonio Inoki in Japan in 1976, that was a work because there was collusion. So fascinated on works, whether they're in MMA, whether they're in boxing, kickboxing, bare knuckle. Jeff, on BKFC 1, there was a lot of talk that Bobby Gunn's bout was a work. Ridiculous.
The phantom quote-unquote phantom liver punch,
Yeah, I don't know what phantom that was because
I don't either.
Bobby Gunn blasted that to the liver. You know, the bout that I did that people still ask me about if it was worked, and it absolutely was not, was Kimbo Slice Ken Shamrock. Again,
you know, they don't really understand, though, especially from Bobby Gunn, that a lot of people who don't know bare knuckle boxing don't know that Bobby Gunn's style is incredibly crazy unorthodox, because it's all about hitting and utilizing parts of the body of your opponent that you wouldn't normally use on a standard boxing bout. You're seeing people punching, you know, under the arms. You're seeing people punch on the forearms. I mean, he's using all these different pressure points in these different areas on the body of which he would hit somebody, as opposed to a traditional gloved fight. So I think a lot of people that don't understand bare knuckle fighting don't understand that dynamic of it.
Yeah, it just go ahead, Josh. I'm sorry.
I want to throw this in there real quick. And sheer nothing's been verified, but I know of at least one person that's talked to me privately, and I don't want to say who it was, where claims that they were indeed involved in that, and that it was partially a work.
Which bout is this?
The Bobby Gunn fight. I'm telling you no chance. I'm not gonna say it was. I'm not gonna say that. I'm just saying that there has been one person who I know. How do I word this? I can verify that they were involved with Bobby Gunn. I'm not saying that I verified that it was work or anything, but I'm just saying that this person does have ties to him, and it's an interesting bit of information that they gave me a while back. So maybe one day I'll dive into that on here or not. I don't know, but I'm just saying I'm not saying it was. So for people listening, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I was given a piece of information that was just interesting. So
we were there, and I agree with Sean on that. That no way.
I'm not saying it was. I'm not saying it was. I'm just saying that I was. Yeah. There was just information that was given to me, and I've always found it interesting. But
my buddy Joe Wilk, who fought in Bellator, fought in Strikeforce. He was my color commentator on Victory. Joe Wilk's a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, had over 40 fights in MMA. He's actually going to be fighting when we do the bare knuckle card in Wichita. Joe said to me, whether they admit it or not, every fighter in every fight in the back of their mind is thinking, how do I get out of this? And people sometimes look at fights that they think will be competitive and they turn out to be squashes. Well, that must be a fix. It must be a work. That's someone saying, you know what, this is not my night, and I want to get out of here. A great example of that is Mike Tyson, Bruce Seldon. Mike Tyson knocks out Bruce Seldon. The crowd starts chanting fix. I think Bruce Seldon realized, you know what, this isn't going to go well for me, and I can lose the easy way or I can lose the hard way. And I kind of had that feeling on the Bobby Gunn fight that he's facing an opponent who thinks, I'm probably not going to win this fight, so how do I want to exit this fight? Do I want to exit with taking little punishment, or do I want to exit getting completely smashed and going to the emergency room? So for me, that is a complete shoot on that. But this is why I love this. This is why I'm developing this book. This is why I wrote those articles. Is, you know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I will tell you that any good conspiracy theory has something in there where you think, yeah, that's true. If a conspiracy theory is too outlandish, there are only fringe people who believe it. But if there's just enough to get moderate people and centrist people, you go, that's cool. That's what I love about shoots and works. There's just enough in there that you go, Yeah, I could see that. That makes sense. That's why Kimbo sliced Ken Shamrock. Just because of men,
Yeah.
it kind of made sense. Again, I commentated that. John McCarthy, one of my best friends in the world, refereed that. 100% that is a shoot. I can see why people thought that was a work. And same thing with the Bobby gunfight at BKFC 1.
Yeah, but wasn't Aeronau, wasn't he injured as well?
You know, he was limping.
Because I saw him limping at the hotel.
Wyoming, and he was limping throughout. And I know there were a number of fighters who were looking at him and rolling their eyes, thinking he was faking the limp. Whether he was or he wasn't, I have no idea. Yeah. But I can tell you there were fighters on that card who thought that he seemed scared. They thought that he was faking the limp, and they thought that he was already building his excuse. And we all know, being around this business, there are fighters who, from the moment they show up, are already telling you why they lost and why they're going to lose and why it's not their fault, building those excuses. Oh, it's my asthma. I've got a lot of personal problems. Oh, I had a bad weight cut. Oh, my coach left me. Oh, my teammates screwed me up. Oh, I'm injured. So that was the case on that.
I tell you what, Sean Wheelock, again, we could listen to you talk for another 90 minutes plus. So you're always welcome on the show, and hopefully we'll bring you back onto the show sooner than later, because I would love to dive more into like pro wrestling stuff with you and just kind of pick your brain about that, and get off the MMA bare knuckle stuff and just talk straight pro wrestling.
I would love to talk pro. I'll leave you guys with this. Part of being a native Kansas Cityan is we had the Central States territory, and I spent a lot of, or misspent as the case may be, a lot of Thursday nights at Memorial Hall in Kansas City, Kansas, with Central States Pro Wrestling. Territory owned by two legends, both have passed away, Harley Race and Bob Geigel. Phenomenal territory. So yeah, let's talk some kayfabe next time. Absolutely.
Well, guys, that's going to be about it for us. We're going to get out of here. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube. Check us out. iTunes. We're everywhere, man. So please subscribe, follow, you know what to do, share, all that good stuff. For Sean Wheelock, for Mr. Live Worldwide, Jeff Houston, I am Joshua Fers. That's all we got, and we're out.
Feliz Cinco de Mayo!